Thank you. Rich Rubino is a political historian, analyst, and author. Thanks for joining us tonight, Rich. Congress has led a lot of newscasts in 2023, newscasts like this, but they led it because of politics, right? Not policy. I'm thinking about speaker battles, George Santos. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that suggests the public is frustrated with this lack of actual action and no policy changes, or do Americans expect Washington to do very little?
I think theoretically, if you look at the poll, 13% of Americans are satisfied with the United States Congress, and it's very hard to actually meet one of those people. But that being said, how much are people actually interested in this? Probably not quite as much. I think when you hear though about how unproductive it was, part of that is just because of the partisan makeup, and it's actually, it is this eerie similitude between this Congress and the 72nd Congress, which was the least productive before this one in terms of passing bills. And if you look at the majority, in that case, Herbert Hoover was president. The Republicans had a one-seat majority in the United States Senate. The same thing. Right now, Joe Biden's president. The Democrats have a one-seat majority, and there were 213 Democrats or Republicans in the House of Representatives. Today, there are 213 Democrats in the House of Representatives. This just shows how bifurcated it is. But in terms of do the American people really care? Yes, but it's more of a kind of a secondary or tertiary issue for them, I think.
All right, let's put on your crystal ball if you can. Going into next year, does Congress have any more reason to be a bit more bipartisan, get some things done to help people who are struggling to put food on the table? This is a big issue when you go out to some of these swing states. Or are we at a stage where the other side just doesn't want to give the other side any type of political victory?
You have to go down to self-interest, right? And in terms of the congressmen who come from swing districts, the now 17 members with George Santos gone, who are Republicans who represent congressional districts that Joe Biden won, they have to have an incentive to go back to their constituents and say, this is what I've done, this is how I've worked in a bipartisan way. And that bodes well for Joe Biden to try to get legislation passed. The other side, there are a few Democrats, folks like Jared Golden from Maine, for example, that he wants to go back to his constituents in Maine and say, look, I got this piece of legislation passed, or I got this earmark passed, or I got something in an appropriations bill, something to that effect. But the vast majority of members of Congress, though, are either very conservative Republicans or very liberal Democrats who come from very gerrymandered districts in the United States House of Representatives. And the only way they're possibly going to lose, most likely, their seat is going to be in a primary. So what does that mean? That means you have to essentially go to the fringes, become as partisan as you possibly can, and go back to your constituents and say, I fought the other party versus I worked with the other party to get this legislation enacted.
Yeah, Rich, you're so right, because if you're living in a place that's not bipartisan, that's not purple, if it's red, if it's super blue, why act bipartisan if your constituents aren't really looking for that or not? One place, though, that is active, right? State capitals, a lot of laws are changing there. I think we in the media focus a lot on, what's happening, the U.S. Capitol, but state capitals are busy with activity.
Yes, and this is why, if you look at governors often get elected president, whether it was Jimmy Carter in 76, Ronald Reagan in 1980, Bill Clinton in 92, George W. Bush in 2000, because governors can go back, they can run for president and say, this is what I've actually accomplished, and often they can do it in a bipartisan way, like George W. Bush in 2000. Part of his presidential platform was, I worked for the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House endorses me. The Democrat Lieutenant Governors endorses me. It's a lot more bipartisan. If you look at the National Governors Association, for example, you have scenarios where Bill Clinton and Lamar Alexander were very good friends in the 1980s. It's just a different scenario. It's not quite as partisan as the United States Congress is. You don't have these scenarios where you have somebody representing like Mike Johnson representing a district that's overwhelmingly Republican, and then his counterpart, Congressman Jeffries, representing a district that's overwhelmingly Democrat. You actually have to get things done. And interestingly, Phil Scott of Vermont, Charlie Baker of Massachusetts, and Larry Hogan of Maryland were the three most popular governors in the last cycle in the country, and they are all Republicans and represent the three states which are the best states for Joe Biden electorally.
We need a little levity, a little laugh, right? Can you help us out here? You wrote the political Bible of humorous quotations. Can you give us anything to laugh about the last session of Congress?
About the last session of Congress? Well, I think that's an oxymoron, but I can go back in history and I can say, in terms of, here's something. One of the institutionalists, United States Senate, and one time when things were actually being accomplished was certainly 1964, 1965. Lyndon Johnson was president. He was working with Everett Dirksen, who was the Senate Minority Leader from Illinois. And Everett Dirksen, all he wanted to do was one up President Johnson. They really had a battle on that front. And one time, Lyndon Johnson would always be talking to Everett Dirksen in his car phone. This is when car phones were a big deal. And one time, Everett Dirksen was talking to President Johnson and said, "By the way, Mr. President, I want to let you know that I'm talking on my car phone," because he finally got one. President Johnson looks and he says, hold on a minute, Ev. The other line is ringing."
There it is. A little joke, right? I hope that got a chuckle from folks watching at home.
Not about this Congress, but historically, yeah.
Rich Rubino, political historian, analyst, and author. Thanks for your insight and for the laughs as well.